Hello, welcome to the Progressive Perspective. I'm joined by Kurt and Larry. My name is Basil. Tonight we're talking about the police. And oh boy, what a year to talk about the police. Obviously, with the massive explosion of protests across the country, protests that were a long time coming, we're seeing more attention to this issue that just needs some friggin' attention. Kurt, you have something to say?
I do. Yeah. Thanks, Basil. So I'm kind of like, I'm like talking to America right now, because that's what we want to do here is educate. So like, I'm not talking to YouTube specifically, but like America. So we're educating now. So the police, like real quick, like where did it start? You know, and essentially it was for capturing runaway slaves. And in these sundown towns, they would have what they referred to as pig laws and racist laws that usually dealt with slaves. And that's how it all started. And then it just progressively got more and more of a societal thing that everyone got used to. And then so ask yourselves, what is the job of the police? And I think more often than not, the answer you would get is to protect and serve. But that's not true. There's been Supreme Court cases where they say that that is not the case. The protect and serve slogan was written in for an LAPD motto contest in the 50s. And someone wrote it in, protect and serve, and they liked it. And then like the same thing, it just kind of spread around. And then the Supreme Court has said that no, that's not the case. If you are in a public place and in need of police assistance, and if there's a police right there, he does not have to help you. So kind of let that sink in. Okay, so geez. So how much has things changed? We may still be enforcing pig laws more than we are protecting and serving. And then, so we talk about like the more finer intricacies of how it came about throughout the years. And one of the things that a lot of people have heard is qualified immunity. So what's qualified immunity? In a nutshell, it's they're above the law to the point they can't be part of a lawsuit. You can't sue them as a police officer. They are immune, literally.
Kind of a license to kill, hasn't it?
It is. It very much so. It incentivizes them to be the oppressor and to not be of the protect and serve nature. So yeah, and qualified immunity, there's a lot of things and how that's evolving too, to where it's more helping the police officers than it is the victims that they're hurting. And so that's, you know, part of the reason why we're talking about this is so we can change the thought process and change. And so when these evolutions happen, we evolve better and not worse. And some of the other intricacies are civil asset forfeiture. So when you ask people, like we mentioned earlier, a little bit ago, what are the police for? Well, to stop burglaries and robberies and stuff. But that's not necessarily the case either. And I'll put some sources in the description, but the numbers on the civil asset forfeiture are pretty eye-opening. So what is civil asset forfeiture? Basically, it's property can be criminal, is what it is. So the police can take your money, they can take your car, they can take your property, anything, and they don't have to arrest you. They don't have to even charge you with a crime. And they can take that stuff as evidence. And so some of the numbers I've seen are 87% of federal forfeitures are civil, not criminal, meaning that criminal charges and a conviction are not involved in the overwhelming majority of these seizures. So more often than not, it's got nothing to do with even a crime at all. It's just they're there, they have something to take, they take it. And so it's okay.
They commit the crime.
Exactly, yeah. So then you think, okay, well, then they just go get their money back, right? It's not really the case either. So one of the articles I read was from illinoispolicy.org, and they're saying in their state, they have a thing where you have to give either $100 or 10% of the value that they took, the police, in order for you to contest it. So if they take $100,000 from you, you now have to give up 10% of that just so you can try to get your money back. And then more often than not, you don't get your money back. And in 2000, this is a good one. In 2014, police took more from people through civil asset forfeitures than all burglaries combined. All burglaries combined
Pretty good
that
racket.
year didn't equal what the police took from people. It's shameful. And then one last article on the civil asset forfeiture I read from the PulitzerCenter.org. It says, in the past 2 decades, the federal government took in $36.5 billion in assets police seized from people on America's roads and in its poorest neighborhoods, many of whom never were charged with a crime or shown to have any drugs. Yeah, tough. And then I got, one last intricacy that I like to talk on. When someone, we keep talking about, I keep mentioning what people think of the police. And I think a lot of it is the law and order. They say, we got to have police, we got to have law, and we have order. Question for you two. What do you think is the percentage of crimes that get solved? So meaning crimes that someone gets convicted in all of America. Just what's your guesses?
Somewhere in the 80s, 70s, 70 to 80, I guess.
70, 80? Larry, what do you think?
I would think it's really low, farther down, like maybe 20.
Maybe 20? Well, it's 2.
Let me just tell you. Let me tell you a quick anecdote. I have a friend in a town in southern Colorado, and he was away from his home, and a guy who was an ex-mayor saw somebody breaking into my friend's house and carrying out computers and TVs and stuff, and so the ex-mayor called the police, and they said, "Well, you don't live in the residence?" He said, "No." He said, "Well, then we can't do anything about it." They just let them ransack the guy's house,
Crazy.
So
It's crazy. Yeah, the actual numbers are less. This is from, these numbers are from the Pew Research Center. Less than 50% of the crimes get reported. 11% of those have arrests. 2% get convictions. Yeah. And they did say, I do want to preface that or whatever by saying that some of their numbers come from the FBI's website. And then I went on that and they said that a lot of counties, the counties aren't actually, they don't have to give the numbers. So there is some estimates with those numbers, but it's the best numbers I could be come up with. So that's that. And I want to touch on one more thing I got here that I think is probably the toughest thing that people don't want to talk about. And there's a little bit of hee-haw back and forth. So I'm not sure if you guys are aware, but in 35 states, it's legal for police to have sex with someone in their custody. Were you guys aware of that?
I was aware because there was a story about a cop having sex with a prostitute like a dozen friggin' times because they couldn't catch the pimp, and he wasn't charged for it. Like I might be screwing up a bit of the details, but
Oh, yeah. Well, the Snops, which is pretty much the online fact checker, and they said, yeah, it's true because they have a loophole name for it, but they said federally forced rape is illegal, but they have a loophole because when you're in police custody, what they say goes. When you had your Miranda rights, anything you can say will be used against you. So now if the cop wants to have sex with you, if you say no, that can be used against you in the court of law, right? And so they have this loophole. And
how would that be used against you?
Yeah, and there's not a law saying that they can't have sex with someone in their custody. all that they need to do is have the cop say that it was consensual. Because while in their custody, you don't have the right to even have that, the say. So if the cop says it's true, supposedly there's consent. And in 35 states, there's not a law saying that's not allowed. And it happens.
Well, the power that police have over citizenry is tremendous. And whenever you have a disparity of power like that,
Yeah.
it gets abused.
Really,
I remember, do you have some more stuff to say,
No,
Kurt?
no, that really covered like kind of the high points of what I wanted to just kind of touch on, and just because a lot of people don't know these things, because who wants to write about things like that and read about
Yeah.
it? 'Cause it's not
Well,
real.
there's a lot of misconceptions about police. And, to me, I would like to go to the basic question of who do the police serve, really?
Mm.
What purpose does the law serve, really? I mean, the laws, when you talked about during the times of slavery, when they were hunting down ex-slave, the law was serving the slave owners.
Yeah.
And law to this day basically serves the ruling class. My opinion is to keep the rabble and regular people in line. That's largely what the police are for. Not that there aren't some functions they do that. I mean, I've even called there one night when I lived in Tucson, Arizona. I heard some guy beating the heck out of a woman early hours of the morning, and I called the police. I mean, so at times they can be useful or constructive, but basically I avoid the police. Now that I'm older, they pretty much leave me alone. When I was a teenager living in Florida, southern Florida, with long hair, literally there's periods in my life when every time I went out of my house on foot, the cops stopped me. Sometimes put me in the back of the car. They never did anything, roughed me up or did, but it was a drag, And I remember thinking as a teenager, geez, what must it be like to be a black person? Because it was horrible to feel like you can't leave your damn house without these guys with guns intimidating you. So, and there's other misconceptions about the police, like, their job's so dangerous and all that. And, in some lists, they're not even in the top 20 most dangerous jobs. I mean, farming, logging, fishing,
Gardening.
construction, roofing, these are all more dangerous jobs. So the way I feel about police is that, first of all, they should be highly trained, highly motivated people. And the last thing they'd want to do is shoot somebody. And obviously we know that they often go into situations where instead of de-escalating and serving the public by trying to preserve peace, they instigate
They agitate.
trouble, they agitate, they instigate, they're arrogant, rude, violent, and sometimes deadly. I mean, in the United States of America, I always consider a policeman to be a potentially dangerous person. Let me contrast with you. I haven't been there for about 4 years, but I have some experience in the country of Nicaragua, small, poor country with a ostensibly socialist government. And I like the police there. I have no hesitation of dealing with them, asking them for information, chatting with them in the streets. And here at home, I never do that. I would never just strike up a conversation with a cop because I consider them to be always potentially a problem. And the police, should be there to help us. And what the future of the police should be is a big question. But as they exist in the United States now, first of all, we know they've been, generally speaking, highly militarized, that there are a lot, military weapons, that there's a substantial percentage of ex-military people in the police, and that in the military, and then sometimes in the police institutions themselves, are trained to see to look for enemies and then to treat the public as enemies. And being that we have such a high level of racism inherent in our society, you're talking about racist, empowered people with guns and lots of other weaponry going out with a mindset that leads to problems and trouble. A black man could consider that in his lifetime has a 1 in 1,000 chance that he'll be shot by the police, and that's, you know, a couple times the average for the general public. But I mean, the police should be the most highly motivated people out there, and let's pay them. I mean, the job is hard, it's dangerous, but their job should be to protect, to defend, to de-escalate, to make sure that we have a safe environment to live in. But basically, what you described, Kurt, with the confiscation of property, I mean, in many instances, the police are the criminals. It's a very uncomfortable situation when those who are supposed to be enforcing the law are disobeying the law and criminals. I remember a story, I believe it was in a LA County prison. I'm not absolutely sure, but it was in Southern California, I believe, where the prison guards, which are a form of police, had a gang. And to be a member of that gang, you needed to break the bone of a prisoner. You know,
Yeah,
bizarre.
it's a special kind of person that the police attract to their job, because oftentimes it's people who don't feel strong, don't feel powerful in their daily lives, and that badge gives them power. That badge gives them a sense of strength that they otherwise just don't have, and they lord it over people. I've met numerous jackasses with a badge, and that's not to say that all cops are bad, obviously, but there are a very, very significant number of bad apples.
I don't think you should even call them bad
Yeah,
apples, because
that's why I put 'em in
institutionally they're
permanent.
encouraged. If it was only a few bad, and the other thing is they
And that goes
do
to police
wrong
culture.
things and then nothing happens to them. You know, the guy who killed George Floyd, I believe, had 18, I think it was about 18 incidents of misconduct. Why would you keep a guy like that in a job like that?
Yeah, that's just the policing culture that must change.
The Apple thing,
The social trust.
is a legit thing. I'll tell you why. The whole saying is one bad apple spoils the bunch, right? And that's for a reason. So what they're saying is one bad cop. Or let me back up. It's because when apples decay, they produce a chemical. That chemical literally rots the apples next to it. So that's the metaphor here. So one bad cop gets other cops to be bad with him until they outnumber the good ones, and pretty soon there are no good ones because
Plus, they
everything's
protect each other.
Yep.
You know, so even if some cops haven't committed the offenses themselves, they tend to protect each other.
Yes. Yep. Yep. You know, and like you're saying, how they're not run through the ringer enough. It's a 21-week program, and they go out of their way to not hire the most intelligent ones because they don't think they'll last. And when I was researching for the show, I was reading that in America, a black man ages 24 to 29, the leading cause of death is police officer. Yes.
Really,
Yes.
you're gonna have to put that in the link description below.
I will.
But the social trust has just been shattered this past year. You know, it's really tough that, like, people just think that black people were making up that police treat them like that? Was it just that? So was it 92, Larry, the Rodney King beating, where all of America sees all these cops beating up this black guy? It was like, oh my God, it's a surprise. Like, and every black person in America is like, a surprise. That's my life.
If it wasn't for cell phone videos from passersby, the average people wouldn't know anything about this. It would continue without much comment, really. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
and so
going on. It's going on forever.
yeah, and so the answer to whether or not people thought, well, did you think that black people were just making it up? The answer is yes, unfortunately, because they don't live that life. They don't live that world.
Well, Larry, you said a really powerful thing. So imagine waking up and being a black man, or something to that effect, just now, earlier. And that really hit home with me. Like, I'm thinking in my head, like, imagine your day to day, how it would be different if you just woke up one day and you're a black man in America. You know, just the little intricacies of your life would completely change.
Or a Native American,
Or a Native,
or
Any
a
minority.
Mexican, Salvadoran. Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially around these parts. I think that's probably, like, in our areas, a lack of culture, and it just kind of gets from generation to generation. It's almost like a family tree of hatred. You know?
Certainly, we know that in central Minnesota, racism is deep and strong. I don't know if you guys noticed a few years ago when the ethnocentric demagogic speakers came through the area, both targeting, Muslim immigrants and Latino immigrants. And I mean, they got some very positive, I went and saw a number of them speak, and the audiences, I don't know, they like to feel that they're white, Christian, good, and
Yeah.
other people are, not the same.
I remember having an experience one time where I was kind of half joking. We were talking about racism, and I said, if I'm racist towards white people. I could look like, and they go, do you realize you're white, Kurt, right? And I go, well, I don't. Do you hate them because they're black? Is that your reason for hating them? Is there just no other reason? It's just you don't like the shade of their skin? That can't be the reason. If you hate someone, you must have a reason other than that. No, they didn't. They didn't. And I explained to him, like, well, I would be racist towards a white guy because every problem in my life has stemmed from a white man. Literally. They're still in the office. Many of them. I'm 36, and so it started when I was born. Every white man in Congress and Senate is the cause of most of my problems.
I think that the reason why we're seeing the ginormous surge in protests is because the problem hasn't been fixed. Every friggin' week, every day you see there's a video of another black person or just another person getting murdered by the police. Still nothing's done.
Yeah.
8 years of Obama, there's some pardons. Overall, the system doesn't change at all. Nothing's done. And 4 years of Trump, nothing is done. The system is still just as terrible as it always was. And so people see that
like, serve the people that it's meant to serve. I mean,
yeah.
And people just see that and they're like, you're not going to help me. You're not going to change things. Well, damn, I'm going to grab a pitchfork and a torch. Like,
yeah, I would say things have gotten much worse. I would say just for the fact that with Trump's feds, I don't know, in like Oregon, they were literally just going and kidnapping people off the street and putting them in unmarked cars and calling them feds. Well, I don't know if you guys
have no markings.
That, but what they think it is Betsy DeVos, who is the Department of Education secretary, right? Her husband, brother, Eric Prince, has his own military that Trump has already said that he was going to hire. That's the feds that he was going and kidnapping people in Oregon, just pulling them off the streets and throwing them in unmarked vehicles. And
that's crazy. They were trying to privatize the military like in the early days of the Trump administration.
Yeah.
But like for real.
Yeah. And they're like based on like Montana or something.
Yeah. And
they did much of that, post 9/11 with contracting out a lot of military missions.
About mercenaries.
Blackwater, yeah, mercenaries and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Ultimately, well, I mean, what's the reason for racism in our country? It's a manipulation by the ruling classes to make sure that we don't unite and throw the bastards out. That's what
Yeah.
it's all about.
It's just hate of the other. When I was a kid, George Bush needed an issue to galvanize, so he picked gay marriage. And now, like, as I grew up, gay marriage is pretty much a settled issue. So now we gotta attack the transgender people.
Yeah. I remember seeing a meme one time. I don't think it's scientifically correct, but I think it hit home for a lot of people. They asked, where does racism stem from? And they had it's a drawing of like a beaker and a stem that come out of it, and there's a Bunsen burner underneath. And in the beaker was labeled fear, and the Bunsen burner was labeled ignorance. And then dripping out of the straw was the racism.
So kind of like a political cartoon.
Yeah, that's what it was. Not a meme, a political cartoon.
Yeah.
But I'm told the science isn't real, but it makes sense. Fear powered by ignorance just leads to racist ideologies.
Well, look, when the colonies were first founded, there wasn't all that much difference between Black people that were brought here to work and white people that were brought here to work, many as indentured servants. They didn't live that differently. But the ruling class, which was very small in number, needed a way to keep them divided. So by giving, small privileges to the white people, they were able to, to divide. And that's just carried on to this day. I mean, institutional racism in our society continued under Obama as much as under any other president. Racism, they made it a part of the culture. So that, I knocked on some doors for Bernie where people would say stuff like, oh, Bernie, he wants to take my tax money and give it to Black people who won't work.
That's an ignorant.
And like, I've heard people in central Minnesota say something like, comment about lazy Mexicans, when the Mexican people that live in Morrison County are among the hardest working people you'd ever see.
I think that.
And immigrants in general, they work hard and are more law abiding than our Christian white neighbors. That's just statistical fact.
It's just,
We have the numbers on how many migrants and immigrants start businesses each year due to the census. So we know there's a huge amount of businesses that are strictly just from immigrants.
and society beats it India from a young age. I'm ashamed to admit that sometimes when I'm walking and I see a colored person, there's a part of me that's like, oh, I want to walk the other way, even though in my heart I know that's wrong. In my mind I know it's wrong. There's that part of me that's like, oh, and I force myself to keep going because I'm trying to fight that ignorance in myself. That's
because you believe that you should be afraid. Is that?
Yes, like it's just like an instinctual. Have you guys heard of a Jane Elliott's Brown Eyes Blue experiment?
No.
Say that again.
Have you guys heard of a Jane Elliott's Brown Eyes Blue experiment? Okay, so it's an experiment. I'll send it to you guys in a text later. But basically, Jane Elliott is this old school teacher, and she takes students and she separates them between blue eyes and brown. She has the brown-eyed people go off to the side and watch what she's going to do to the blue-eyed students. And she tells the blue-eyed students that because they have blue eyes, they are inherently dumber than the people with brown eyes. And she tries to convince them of that. And I'll send it to you guys. I'll put a link in the description below. It's a really thoughtful experiment. It's incredible.
Interesting. Sounds kind of Hitler-y with the blue
Is
eye.
it ethical?
She actually says, I got the idea from Hitler.
God. Okay.
Hitler got a lot of ideas from U.S. racism
Yep.
and propaganda. He learned from our World War I propaganda.
Yeah. We are the kings of weaponized hatred.
I want to end this on like what should we do about this? Like, we should, step one, we need to get rid of these feckless, loser, just cowardly Democratic leaders who never fight, because we're never going to get anything done while these weaklings are in charge, while they stop us. So one, throw them out. Two,
Well, the establishment of the Democratic Party is allied with the ruling class, and the situation as it is has served the ruling class, and the Democratic establishment is not going to rock that boat.
I think the politicians aren't going to help us. I think that the police union is where we need to start. I think the police union, which is the largest one in America, that's what's holding up from them being accountable for their own actions. That's what's giving them their immunity. That's what's backing up with their dollars. Start there. We need to change the conversation from defund to something different. Like, I don't know what, but just give them less to do. They shouldn't be in charge of rape cases, give them a scope for what they can handle. Most of their calls are domestic disturbances, and they don't have the education to
they're not equipped for them.
No. Whereas a social worker would be equipped to go and handle a situation like that.
Mental
Less
illness.
to do, so they can do better at what they are.
Remember the case in Little Falls a few years back where somebody called, I think it was a son, who was suicidal, and the police end up coming and killing him,
I remember that.
Yeah.
But there's a ton of police reforms that we need to do. We need to whenever there's a killing, a police officer killing someone, there needs to be an independent prosecutor brought in.
Yeah.
Because if you're just
They
going with
investigate themselves.
a local investigator, the investigator needs to keep a working relationship with the local police. And so there's a conflict of interest there. That's an easily reform to make, and like there's just serious changes that must be made to our justice system.
Yeah, a lot of changes. One idea that I've always been fond of is that police who are supposed to uphold the law should suffer double the consequences for any crime that they commit. I mean, they should be held to the highest standards. And police with records of unhealthy relationships with the community, why should they be there? I mean, that shouldn't exist.
You shouldn't,
and realize
you shouldn't be
also
allowed
that
to do that.
police officers often live far away from the communities they police. They have no interest there. They don't know the people. They don't share a life in common with the people.
Yeah.
Well, that's about all the time we have. Thank you, Kurt. Thank you, Larry.
Thanks, Basil.
Thank you, Basil. Thank you, Elvis.
Thank you, baby. All right. Have a good one, y'all.
Thanks. See ya.
Bye-bye.